Well, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 10 o'clock here, Mountain Time, and we're going to be talking about the Forms Editor today. During the webinar here, we're going to go ahead and just mute everyone's microphone. If you have any questions or something that might come up during my explanation of the Forms Editor, feel free to use the chat function on the GoToMeeting part. And if I see the question, I'll try to answer it. And then at the end, we'll go ahead and open up for some question and answer at that time and comments. So again, I'll go ahead and thank you for attending. I'll go ahead and mute everybody. All right, so we're going to be talking today about the Forms Editor. First of all, as you know, this is our regular Wednesday webinar, Keystroke Live. And what we're going to do is we're going to do this every Wednesday, 10 o'clock Mountain Time. And today's day is for Forms Editor. The Forms Editor is one of your dealer-only tools. It's part of your not-for-resale dealer license. Allows you to modify, create, and make changes to any invoices, receipts, statements, purchase order forms, gift card receipts, for instance, and so forth. We're going to show you some examples of the forms we already ship with Keystroke. That'll actually have some logos on them. We also have some that print out barcodes. They can be printing the barcodes, let's say, on a receipt for return. For let's say if you're doing returns, you want to scan in and have Keystroke find the invoice immediately. Forms Editor allows you to rearrange the text, change the text, change what fields are shown on forms, and also allows you to do other things which we'll see later on about changing some colors and, like I mentioned, logos and barcodes, and then adding form messages. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and open up the Keystroke point of sale program. And I thought in this example here I would start with some things I've already made and some that already ship with Keystroke, and that'll allow you to kind of get the visual of where we're going with this presentation today, and some of the features that are kind of part of Keystroke and some are part of Keystroke Advanced. But I'd like to show them to you visually first, and then we'll go ahead and show you how they were done second. So I'm in Sales Manager here. Just for the sake of time, I've already created a transaction here. In this case, this transaction was done using a credit card payment type. I also turned on the signature capture using a tablet PC or a screen, touchscreen monitor. In my case, I signed with my mouse, so you'll see quite an interesting signature. I always love signing with a mouse. Never seems to work right. Anyhow, I'm going to show you just some print buttons that I've made. Just for this demonstration, I've created a signature form. I created a receipt with color, actually just showing the color red, and I'll show you how that's able to be done. And of course, this is a printer that's capable of printing color. I created a barcode invoice. That's going to show you the invoice number barcoded, and it'll show you the line items barcoded also. Can also be used to barcode serial numbers. And a logo receipt and so forth. Well, let's start with the simple logo receipt. I'll kind of minimize these as I print them to the screen. This right here is just basically a 40-column receipt that has the Keystroke logo put on the top of the form. Now, for any of this to work with logos and graphics, one of the key things you need to know is that the printer needs to be set up in Windows, because we use the Windows driver to allow it to manage the graphics. And so in this case, even though I'm printing this to the screen for demonstration purposes, if I were to send this to a black and white laser printer, that logo would be black and white. If I was to send this to an old, very old dot matrix printer, it would be pretty much, if it could print graphics, it would print, you know, the good old dot matrix days and eat up a lot of ribbon. If I printed to a printer that was just a plain text printer, you wouldn't see the logo at all. And so anyhow, this is an example of the logo, and I'll show you that shortly on how that form looks. Let's close this. And let's go ahead and do the barcode invoice. This is an invoice here where we've actually barcoded the invoice number in the upper right next to the human readable invoice number, number 35. And we've actually barcoded the product codes. You can pretty much barcode any field that's available on the form. In this example, like I mentioned, we just picked to do it very simply here where we're printing the product code and printing the form. And if we go in the forms editor and want to tidy this up, I might want to move the numbers in the product code over a character, maybe make things line up a little nicer. Let me just show this full page, what it looks like. So this is an 8.5 by 11 form that has the invoice number barcoded, the items barcoded, and so forth. And we'll show you shortly how that's made. I'll pick apart all of these very shortly. Okay, let's take a look at I've created one called Color Red. It's a receipt where I've added red around the keystroke payment information. So normally this might be done for returns. I was just kind of coming up with ideas, and I decided, well, I'll make the Visa credit card payment and so forth, make that in red and show the approval code in red. Just in this case here, I didn't want to spend too much time, but you can go in and if anything were negative, for instance, or if there was a discount, you could show the discount in red. Let's show this form a little bit smaller. So this form is kind of a 40-column receipt. It shows the line item information. I've also chosen at the bottom to print the I agree to pay the above, whatever your form message is, in red. This is different than a logo. This is not a graphic that's in red. It's just the text that we're printing. We're using Keystroke in the forms editor to make it red. Okay, and that's my crazy signature there with the mouse. It's actually not my signature. Some squiggly lines. So let's take a look. The last one is just the signature form. It's kind of one that we ship. I started with this form, and this is the one I started with before I made things red on it. So let's go see how it's done. First of all, I'll show you the print buttons just so you make note of what the forms are. Okay. I'm going to go first to Configuration Manager, and we're going to go to the Tables menu at the top, and we're going to talk about print buttons very quickly. We also have a report of print buttons in case you have a lot of print buttons and they get confusing. Here's my Sales Manager print buttons, and I've got the logo, the barcode, the color red, the signature. I've got some others I'm not using, but I'm going to quickly just show these to you. This logo receipt, this was the receipt that showed the Keystroke logo at the top, and this is one of the forms we ship. It's called Star Logo A, and the letter A is for advanced in this case, meaning if you want to use the powerful features of the logo option where you set the logo once in the program and then have it print on all your forms, including reports or the Shift F12 screen, anything that comes up in the report viewer or to a printer would have the logo if the form calls it out. And we'll show you that in a moment. Let's go back a step. The barcode invoice. This too is a standard form we ship. It's called KSP Logo B. In this case, we have an A and a B. The A is for advanced. The B we decided to call it just as the barcode. If you click on this, you'll actually see its description. It says it's an 8.5 laser with the logo and the barcode. And as you pull up your list of different forms, there are quite a lot of them. If you don't know what they are, you can hit F3 and get either a simple text description. That's part of the forms editor, which defines what the description is. And some of our forms, we actually some years ago actually created some graphical displays of these. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you can see that there. That's just kind of a picture of what that form is. We haven't done that for the new forms. Okay, anyhow, I'm using logo B in this print button. The color red one, I created this one, and I'll show you how I did it. It's a form called starred.nvc. I could have given it any name. That's the one I chose to give it. And the signature form, Star Sig F. This is a star form which we have just used for many years, which works on Epson printers, Star printers, Big Salon printers. Pretty much it's a 40-column form with the signature, and also the F at the end just means it has a few extra form feeds. And so those are the four we're going to talk about. Then I'll go into the Forms editor and we'll talk about that shortly. But let me just show you one of these advanced features under the Setup menu and under the company's name and address. If I click on that, this is an advanced only feature where we can define what logo is going to be used on printing reports and the different logo forms that we have, like star logo and KSP logo. If I click on this, it gives some information on what the file of the logo is, and this is one we actually ship, so it was easy for us to always install it, but you could put it anywhere as long as it's accessible from all machines in the same location. This little print logo on reports, you can actually tell where to put the logo, the left, top, and so forth. This doesn't have so much to do with forms editing as it does to where you're going to notice in the form we call out the logo variable. I'm going to hit Shift and F12 to show you. Actually, this one doesn't show it here. Okay, so but reports would show it in the upper left. So I'm leaving Configuration Manager. Now we'll go to Forms Editor. Forms Editor is under the Custom Modules. Under the Navigation menu, you would see it under Extensions. But the extensions here are for non-dealers. But if you double-click Extensions, whoops, I just clicked it a second time there, this is where you get the list of the Keystroke extensions plus the Forms Editor. So I'll go ahead and select the Forms Editor. As I do this, it gives you kind of a dealer-only message. This is a dealer-only tool. We provide this to dealers so that they can provide value to your customers. We also found out so there's some complexity to it, so we don't want a lot of people going out there messing with forms and kind of messing things up, spending a lot of time. We want you guys to be the experts and allow you to help your customers. When I first entered the program, the Forms Editor, it asked for which type of form, and pretty much in this example we're going to be just talking about sales invoices and receipts. We'll take a quick look at statements to show you how you can print signatures on statements, for instance. We have some standard forms there too. But let's first start with the receipts and so forth. I'm going to show you a couple of the forms. These are all listed alphabetically. I'm going to go down to the KSP forms, and we just call these KSP for like keystroke printing, and then we have the logo A form and a logo B form. Logo A and B are very similar. B actually has the barcode on it, so I'll show you how that's done. So I'm going to hit enter on this form. First of all, this is a logo form, meaning it's using this variable. This variable here is just actually text. For instance, if I come down here and just start typing, and I'll do it right now, %, logo, sorry, %, and then I can hit enter on it. When you hit enter on it, you'll notice that the actual field is increased, or actually highlighted in yellow. We can do different things on a field to make it bigger or smaller. First thing, just to let everyone know, is to use the F3 key to edit the field. That's kind of the easiest way to do that. I just hit the F3 key, and this talks about what is actually going to be printed. You can actually pick different fields. This is the field text, which is actually going to tell us what to do. Where it's located, it's on line 3, column 1. What its width is, if I want to make this bigger, I go ahead and just change it, and you'll see it change. And I'm just going to say OK to this. So now that field is 10 wide. Let's notice a few things on the bottom. If it's a form message, it'll show you on the lower left what the form message is, or what field it is. Here is the width of the field. The L means it's left justified. The header 1-3 on the right shows that it's in the header section, field 1-3. I'm going to go ahead and just delete this field, and I'll show you the other field here. I'm just going to hit delete. It's always, by the way, best to start with a keystroke form and actually make modifications to it instead of trying to start from scratch. It'll be just too much work. I'm going to hit enter on this field. This is actually where the logo starts, so I'm going to hit the F3 key. Again, it says field text, %logo, and here's where the information, this is where the different tricks of the trade come into play. The field flags, let's just go to that field. You're probably wondering what that number represents, but as in most of Keystroke, if you hit insert, you'll see different choices. This right here is actually different options you can put, or attributes you can put onto a field. In this case, we've decided to say let's print as a graphic file. So this field right here, when I say print as a graphic, it's actually going to go to Keystroke, use that variable called logo or %logo and say go to Configuration Manager, find where that logo is, and print that graphic right there in the upper left. Let's kind of show you some other field flags. So I'm going to just hit escape here. I'm not going to make any changes to that field, and I'm going to hit enter. Let's go. Let's talk about the sections of the Forms Editor. By the way, if you go to the field choice at the top, this is where you get to select the field, edit the field. If you just hit F3 or go to edit field in case you don't have an F3 key, you can go up to this menu here. This is where you actually change some of the codes, like the print code and so forth. Sections, let's talk quickly about those. I guess this is most important. We have 3 sections on any kind of form. There's the header, that usually is a very static piece of information. It's printed if there's multiple page transactions. It is printed every time. So as you see over here, I have an actual field called page number. And when I highlight that, and down the lower left it shows page number, that's the actual field. So if I had multiple pages, this header section is going to repeat itself over and over. The body section, that's the looping section. I just clicked on section and body. This is the looping section. This section loops for every line item on a transaction. It can also be used to show component items. I'm going to come back to this shortly here. I go to section at the top and I go to summary. This is the bottom section. You see the nothing here, but there's actually something here. I'm going to page down once or twice. And notice now I get to this line draw character here. If I highlight it, you'll see some interesting things. On the left, bottom left down here, it shows it's a double line. If I hit enter on this field, whoop, where'd my cursor go? Uh-oh. Don't know what I'm doing here. And hit F3, the field text is actually the line draw characters. There's some tricky ways. You can call us if you need to know how to present these. I'll show them to you here in a little bit. Anyhow, that's the line draw characters of a double line. It is 80 columns wide, so it goes the whole length. And it's in an absolute line position, meaning if I look on the bottom right where it says summary 250 is starting in this case, because I moved it somehow, to line number 2, and it's 50 lines down. So the summary section is going to loop on every page and multiple pages starting on line 50. So I'm going to hit cancel here. If I needed to move this down, for instance, or up, I could make changes here too. Or if let's say right now it's still on line 50. If I needed to move it down 1 or 2 lines, I could just put my cursor above it like I have now. And using Control and Enter, which is a way to insert a line, if I do that, it moves the whole body section now. Now if you notice, if I come down to this line and hit F3 on it, now I'm on line number 51 in an absolute position. So no matter how many line items you have, it's going to start the summary section always on line 51. All right, so I'm going to release that field. Let's go back to the body section. This is what this form is about. This is a barcode. So here's what we have. This is the field called product code. I'm going to hit enter on it and hit F3. The field just says product code. If I pull up a list, this is the list of available fields. I'm printing the product code, then I'm printing the description, then the quantity ordered. As you can see, we have all the fields are alphabetical. Except for form messages is always at the top, because we'll talk about that in a little bit. So anyhow, this field is just a plain text field. It's 20 characters wide, and it starts in the line 1-1 of the body section. So it's the beginning of the looping section. Then we have the description, other fields that are on here. This is actually the quantity order field. Notice down in the bottom right, it's 5 characters wide. It's right justified. So if you find out you're using, let's say you ship things that are 23.775, that would actually be 6 characters. The 23, the point is the third, and 775. So this one would get truncated. It would actually truncate a significant digit. So if you find you have that problem, what you can do is change its width. I'm hitting the F3 key to edit the field, and I want to say the width is 6, and it's right justified. If you hit insert on that field, you get some choices. You can see where there's the B for barcode. We're coming back to that. So if I just say OK here, you notice it kind of moved it over, and now it's where it sits. Maybe I want to move that left or right. I'm using the left and right arrow keys at this time. If I want to move it out of the way because I want it bigger, I might come over to description. Here's a tricky hotkey I can use in the Forms editor. If I use the Control key and use like the left arrow key, I can change its width. Control right arrow changes its width. So I might want to make the description smaller because from whatever I'm shipping or ordering, I need a lot more space. So I'm doing Control right arrow a couple times. That makes that field bigger, and you see it grow down on the bottom where it says 10. Now it's a width of 10. So for people that ship out either small quantities with large decimal places or large quantities with decimal places, they usually need the fields bigger than 6 or 8. 8's a pretty good number that you most likely would think things would work out for. You can't overlap these though, so I can't make this so big that it overlaps another field. If I do and I hit enter, it tells me so that the fields can't overlap. If I hit enter, move it out of the way, I can move it over here and then maybe size it up or bring it back in and move it around. And here I'm going to leave it at a width of 10. So that's kind of one way of changing some widths. Let's talk about how the barcode is printed. So we are already printing the product code at the top left. Then we have the product code again. So looking at this field here, I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to hit the F3 key. And here's where the barcode information comes into play. This is where I've gone into this field, hit insert, and when I hit insert, it's just going to actually select B for barcode. And when I do that, it's going to normally just put in the letter B. We have some attributes that are in our help files, and this one is, I'm just going to double check, I just hit escape so I wouldn't wipe it out. B8 actually represents the code 128 barcode. There's like B1 is for UAC, B2 for UACE, B3 is 3 of 9, B8 just happens to be code 128. On our forms, we actually use the code 128 form more often than not because it can actually barcode text along with numbers and some special characters. So people might put in a character like 80.15 as a product code, and if you want to barcode that, then you want to be able to use code 128. There's a lot of requirements for UAC barcodes. The 3, the 2, and the 1. The 3 is its height, and this is all defined in the F1 help keys under barcodes. If you click on index at the top and go to barcodes, I even believe from here you would get the same result. The 21, the 2 and the 1 says its width, and then this is a ratio. This just says how thick the barcode lines should be. So I'm going to go back and reprint this form and then come right back to the Forms editor so I can have something to show you with. I'm not going to change that form. We're working on the barcoded invoice. So this is the form we're working with here. We talked about the quantity here. We made the quantity a different size. I never saved this form, so it didn't change that. We have the, let's make it visible here. We talked about the line draw character down at the bottom. Let's blow it up a little. So we have the printed text product code. We have the description, quantity, and price. Then we have the product code again. So let me leave this up and I'll come back to it. Hopefully whoops, wrong form. Okay, back to the Forms Editor under the exit menu under Custom, Forms Editor. We were just looking at the KSP logo form with the barcode. We were looking at the KSP logo B form. So let's look at it again and then see how it's made. So here's our logo. This is called from Configuration Manager, and we're using a dynamic variable called %logo%, and that's where the logo comes into play. We'll look at the invoice number. It's barcoded up here. Here's some product codes that are numbers. Code 128 handles that. It would handle letters too, but something like the word keystroke might be very long and might just span all the way across into the description. Just keep that in mind. You can't really do small barcodes with letters. It's just the way the industry is. So I'm going to minimize that. Back to here. So we have that logo. We've already talked about it. Under the section summary, the section for body, we're going to go ahead and pull that back up. So we have the product code being printed. Remember I said, gosh, it would be nice maybe if I made that line up a little better. The product code is kind of hanging outside of this line draw, so maybe I want to make it look nice. So I'll go ahead and bring it back. So I highlight it. Again, I can move the field around. I'm just going to move it over one character and make it right there. So we talked about this product code. This is the barcode. If I hit F3 again to edit that and look at it again, this barcode is B8, which means it's a code 128 barcode. It's 3 characters high. It's 2 characters. Actually, 3 is the 3 is the height, and then 2 is the width, and then 1 is the actual, call it the barcode ratio. Pretty much B8 321. You use that anywhere in the program. That's all you need to write down. B8 321. Almost all of our label forms are that way. All of our forms that print barcodes to receipts are that way too. And there's no other special flags on this. We don't have to set anything like a graphics flag or anything like that. Now what I've done here is this little line, this F, you're wondering what that is. It says form message, but what it was, and I'll highlight it and delete it, is I wanted to make enough room to make sure that the barcode was high enough and didn't overlap the text that came below it. So I put the space bar in here. That puts a little dot in there. If I highlight it and hit F3, it shows a space, but I think if I save it and come back, it'll say form message. All it really is a space character. I could have put text, but what I'm doing is creating separation for the actual barcode above it. So that's kind of how that barcode is done, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up a different form to show you here. Just because of time, I want to try to get through some of these features. Let's go through sales invoice here. I'm not going to save any changes here. I'm going to go to the star. Let's go to, Star Sig. Where are you? Okay. So we have the star forms. These star forms are actually a lot of different variations of a 40-column receipt. They work for all 40-column printers. We were looking at the one called Star Sig. Actually, I think it was Star Sig F. I'm going to hit enter on this one. That brings it up for editing. So as you see in here, we have the company name and address. There is no logo on this form. We could add it rather simply. And I'll just do it quickly here. I'll show you what I mean. If I just hit enter, let's say a couple times, I want to make some space for my logo. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to type in %, logo %. I'm going to kind of visually center it. I have to hit F3 on it and give it the magical field flags. This says print as a graphic. And so I won't be able to have time to go through all these different fields. A lot of them, pretty much the new ones people like are they print as a graphic, print as a signature. Some of the don't print if blank or skip line if blank. I'll try to get to some time to show you that. But I'm just going to do print as graphics file. When I hit enter on that, you'll see a little checkbox comes into play by it. Hit F10 to save it. And it puts a number in there. That's just a programming code to know how that works. Say OK. I'm going to save this form as just the number 1 here. And let's go try to print this out quickly, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to kind of laser this through here. So you may not see what I'm doing now. Don't worry about it. This was the start SIG-F form, so I'm just going to go to signature and change the form from the one I started with the one that I want to use up here. I'm going to save these real quick. Let's go back to Sales Manager. Pulling up that last saved transaction, hitting enter or F10 a couple times, and selecting signature. So notice how the graphic I use is very small at the top here. It's really not showing the right size that I want and so forth. So let me show you how you change the size. I'm done here. I'm going to back to the Forms editor. Let's pull up that the form I'm working with, 1.nvc. Here's how you make it bigger. If I'm going to move this to the left and use Control right arrow, again I could just hit F3 and do its width. And I can actually center it if I wanted to, but I don't think I need to. So this form right now, I've made the graphic bigger by just expanding it. What it's going to do is it's going to take that graphic and it's going to not just stretch it to the right, it's actually going to stretch it to the right and downward appropriately. So it's going to try to maintain the graphic's actual dimensions. So just by resizing it to the right here with the bigger width, in this case a width of 23 shown at the bottom, it's going to make that bigger. I'll bet it's going to be too big, but let's go ahead and make it too big just for sure. And let's start with that. So I'm going to go to the form and then select Save. Same name. It already exists. I say OK. Now back to Sales Manager. Again, I'm just going back and pulling this up. Sometimes 2 copies of Keystroke being open works pretty well too. Going back to the Signature Print button. And look at there, that's way too big. If you can see this, you'll see that my company's name and address is kind of overlaid on top of the graphic because I made the graphic too big or I didn't make enough space for it. If I like the size of that graphic, let's say I do like the size of that graphic, I would just need to push down my company name and address information down about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 lines down. So we'll see how that works. And that brings up another point. If you had a watermark, for instance, for your company, let's say you're on a laser printer, if you made a watermark in Paint or some graphics program where it was an 8.5 by 11 watermark, you can actually have it overlaid underneath the receipt. It makes a very nice appearance, a very nice look. Of course, you wouldn't use black like I did. You'd have a very light watermark. So let's close this. I'm going to change this one last time and see how it looks by adding a few lines to this. So I kind of guessed that I wanted to move this down by like 7 lines. So I'm going to hit Control Enter. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that kind of looks pretty funny in the Forms editor. But now I'll go back, I'll save it, and by the way, if you make changes and go back to a different module, it does ask you to save, so it's kind of an easy way. You don't have to go to the other menu. Back in Sales Manager, let's go ahead and print that signature form. There, and so maybe I brought it down 7 lines, got a nice space on there. The actual receipt kind of would look like that. And this is the one with the signature at the bottom. I'm going to quickly kind of show you how you can add color to a form like this. We already saw before how I could change the color here on a receipt. I'm going to use that same form I'm working with and go with it. So let's close this here. Back to the forms editor. Now this one's a little trickier when you try to add colors. Of course, you have to print to a Windows printer. Let's say down here under this payment loop, I wanted to change its color. When I hit enter on this and then hit, let's say, F3 to edit this field, it's just the words amount printed, we have print codes. If I hit insert here, this is where I can turn things on like bold on and bold off. So I can select bold on, and most of the time we turn bold on and off on every single field. In this example for time, I'm just going to turn it on at the beginning of amount over here. Then I'm going to turn it off at the end. So I'm turning it on. I'm going to show you how by turning on emphasized on with our standard keystroke program, we'll make it print in red. So this is going to do two things. It's going to turn on what we call emphasized on, and that's just a tag, and I'll show you where that comes from, and bold on. So I'm saving that. Oops, I think I did this again here. Whoop. Okay. I moved fields around. I think I goofed up here. Let's go back here. I'm going to do emphasized on and bold on here. And then at the end of this looping section here, I am going to go to the space character which stops the looping, and I'm going to turn emphasized off and bold off, which kind of means that from this point over here where the payment loop terms start all the way through here, that section is turned on as bold and red, and then it's turned off here, and so the card holder name would not be bold or red. And let's talk about how you delete a whole line or a field. I can go to these fields and hit enter, and whoops, I'm sorry, I gotta release that. If you notice, I was carrying around that space character. I can either delete the fields one by one, but that leaves a blank space, or you can use control backspace. That actually will delete a line. So let's go see how this works. I'm going to save it again as the same name. Going to go to Sales Manager. Let's print that signature form. So I'm on back to Sales Manager. I'm on the signature form here. I hit enter. And now that section is red. And you're going to say, well, Mike, how did you know that section's supposed to be red when it said emphasized on? Those are just names we've given some of. I could actually make that say red on and red off if I wanted to. But let me show you how that's done, because you're going to need to know that in the future. I'm going to leave this up. I'm going to switch now to Notepad here, but let me. You may not see anything at this time. Okay. I've now opened up Notepad showing our windows.wpd file. This file is actually used to control all the attributes of all the fonts, from their size to their color to their attributes like bold, italic, and so forth. It might look kind of like a puzzle to begin with, but it's not as hard as it looks. When we talk about those print codes where you saw emphasized on and off, this line 3 was actually the third on and off line, and it was set to color 12, and actually color 12 is red. But I can change that by going to my color palette or opening the F1 help, searching for windows.wpd, and you'll see an example of all the colors. The bold on and off happened to be the 5th line down on that, and it actually says when 5 plus, which means line 5 on, is turned on, which happens to be bold, it's going to come over here to the character set, and it's going to set bold to 1, which is on. And bold off is 0, and it brings it back. So you can actually change your sizes and colors and everything just from this file keep in mind, call us if you need help, but you'd always want to change its name and not use windows.wpd, even though nowadays we do not overwrite that file. So if you have problems, you can get it off the CD and they'll reset it to the defaults, and we can talk about that if you need to. So there is kind of a quick way to go about that. Let's go back real quick to here. Okay, so we turn bold and red on and off based on that windows.wpd file. And we could actually change the color like I mentioned. I'm bouncing around here, so don't mind me here. Let's come back into this line. Oh, I'm just going to guess at some numbers. I'm going to change 12 to 10. I'm just going to save that. Back to my keystroke. Now I print the signature again, and the 10 is actually green. So in a sense, you could, that's kind of nice, approve green, great. Now most receipt printers don't print green, some do. Some only print red and black, and some are multicolor printers. Keep in mind that has to go with the type of printer you have. So I've kind of raced through a lot of different things during this forms editor. We've already spent about 40 minutes. More or less, I wanted to make 3 or 4 things known. One is that we ship a lot of forms. We ship forms with logos, with barcodes, with signatures, and so forth. So we kind of have the forms out there as templates you can use to start with. If you get stuck, that's what we're here for. We're here to answer your dealers as questions because we want the dealers to be in the forms editor. Please don't give the forms editor or to any end user because they'll just be calling us for help, and we cannot help them with anything like that. So I am going to unmute the attendees here and kind of take some questions and answers now. And so let me know if you have any questions. I know I didn't kind of cover everything, but I certainly want to show what some of the capabilities of Keystroke are. Are there any questions?
This is Nick. Did you mention that it's good to save your form file names at just 8 characters, 8.3?
Yeah, we've always kind of done that in the past. I use the 8.3 file names. It does work otherwise, but there are sometimes when you copy files, or if you use, let's say, pkzip to back up your files and then restore them, they might get truncated in other processes. So you might end up a file that says calling red credit card. It's called red credit ~1, and now it doesn't work. So 8.3 names are good for a lot of different reasons. And also the forms editor will not let you overwrite one of our standard forms, so you have to give it a different name. And if you do somehow overwrite one of our forms, a reinstall always reinstalls our default forms back the way they are. The good news is you can always get back to that baseline. The bad news is if you, let's say, copy your form called 1.nvc to star logo, and then we install, you would lose all your work. Any other questions?
Yeah, Mike, this is Scott Welch. I came a little late, so maybe you answered this question. But on the fonts, do they have to be fixed with? They all have to be fixed with fonts.
That's a good question, Scott. Yes, let's take a quick look. The reason why he's asking about fonts is that if I use a proportional font, and let's say I'm looking at the dollar amounts here on the right-hand side, because if you use a proportional font, they'll start moving around, and it won't look very pretty when you have numbers that want to line up. You can use, let's say if you were printing labels instead of forms, and labels you didn't care to line up dollar amount over dollar amount over dollar amount, you could put in some proportional fonts and get tricky with colors and sizes and so forth, and they would just kind of move around and float around, but because they're not compared with, let's say, everything else, here's where the total paid lines up with the 2 items above it. But yes, so let's take a quick look here to answer his question in further detail. I'm going to change this over to that windows.wpd. Courier New is an actual proportional font. It's used at 10 characters per inch. So the letter O is the same width as the letter I. You're kind of looking at this file is set up in 10 characters per inch. Otherwise, these columns wouldn't line up so perfectly. So your forms really need to do that, especially with dollar amounts on them. Otherwise, things start floating around. There's only a few fonts that are that way. Courier New, Lucida Console is another one. There's like an A10 font and some other fonts that printers have by default installed on them, but that's a good question. Yes, you want to make them, they call it proportional, non-proportional fonts. They are always 10 characters per inch, regardless of the letter. Any further on that, Scott, or
No,
any other
that's good.
questions?
No, that answers it.
And I could probably make an example if I wanted to just do something like this, save that file. Now I'll skip back to Keystroke and see what, I don't think Times Roman is a proportional font. Here's a good example. Scott was asking this question. You notice how all the dollar amounts don't line up because the spaces on the left of subtotal take up much less space than the words the mummy returns do. So you start getting forms that look like that if you use if you use proportional fonts. Good question. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all for attending. And again, if you have any questions on the Forms Editor, give us a call. And that's it for the Forms Editor. And next week, we have Mike Gebb. The first Wednesday of every month is usually reserved for Mike Gebb, President, to share what's coming down the road. So if there aren't any other questions, I'll go ahead and end the meeting. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.